is first type in n as in newt, npx, npx. So this is the only time you'll have to write npx, I think, for this class. It's just something that's given to us with Node. It's there on purpose. And then we're going to write create dash react dash app space, and then you get to name your app whatever you like. It can't be in camel case, but it can be in anything else. So let's say I'll say my first React app, and hit enter. And now we're gonna wait for about 25 minutes. No, just kidding. It's gonna take a couple minutes though. If yours is not working, let me know. We'll try to figure out what exactly is not working. If you have the most recent version of Node, it should work. You used to have to install it globally, but you no longer need to do that.
So every time we are going to use React, we have to do the npx create.
Well, you don't have to, right? You could create React from scratch. You can put it in any old project, even one with just HTML and JavaScript. But if you're making most likely if you're making like a full React app, you'll be using this. Just because you'll see what it gives us in a minute. But it just makes the process kind of easy. And it's going to create that file for you. So if we've been building on our backends a lot, right? So instead of making a front end folder the way we've been doing it, you would probably do create React app front end, so that it would create that front end folder. Does that make sense? Sure. So we've been making all these projects that have this back end, and then we've been making a front end, and then in the front end we've been doing our front end things. So it's the same kind of thing. We'll still have a front end and back end, but you'll make the front end folder with your create React app. So it would be npx create React app front end. Otherwise, if you make a front end folder and then you cd into it, then you'll have this random front end folder that has just another folder inside of it called front end. Which you'll see, my app will be called my first React app. Yeah, it takes a while. It's installing all of those things that it installed. I don't know my days. I think it was Monday that we did this with Webpack. But we did like Babel, Babel Core, Babel Present, Babel env. Like there were a bunch of things, more than I can remember. Anyone finished theirs yet? No? Cool. That's very cool. Anyone have any interesting things that they're looking forward to on Valentine's Day?
Narcos.
Narcos?
I'm so happy that you asked.
Yeah? What, are you doing something? Oh, no.
It's all about my son.
It's all about your son on Valentine's?
Birthday weekend.
Oh, nice.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. Does he have Valentine? Yeah?
Yeah, 12 years.
Ooh. Yours is done? Yeah. Mine's so slow. Yeah, I would be happy to get rid of everything.
Yeah, just put literally hot like
I don't need it on a hard drive. That's my work computer. I don't store anything.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Oh, yeah?
Like I probably have crap from last year that I can just get rid of or something.
So I'm a storage builder.
Uh-huh.
Where's that like that? You might have to upgrade the RAM.
How?
Yeah, upgrade it.
Oh, maybe. It's their computer.
Oh, I thought this was your door.
No, I wouldn't be working on mine.
Oh, I thought this was
I
like.
got stuff on mine.
Oh,
Just kidding. Almost there. Is anybody else? You're done? Everybody else is done? Great. Well, that's good. Finally. Congrats on the fast computers. Okay, So if yours is done, like, go ahead and CD into the new folder that was created, right? And go ahead and open that in VS Code and take a look at what you've got. Hopefully I'll get to do that with you soon. What if it really is like 25 minutes and like my joke?
Let's carve out.
Yeah, I should never make jokes again. My wife would be thrilled.
What?
What? My wife hates my jokes. No. All right, so we've got an app. So we can see it created this folder, right? This is what I called it. So let's go ahead and CD into it. So my first React app, let's open it up. Yabba dabba, let's do this. As they say on the Flintstones. Okay, let me open this up. Oh my god. Computer is so slow. Is it the airplane? Okay, so what does this give us, right? So we see it gives us our package JSON. It's got all of this stuff attached to it, as well as these startup scripts. Okay, I don't know if this airplay is going to work out for me. And then we've got our get ignore, right? This should seem familiar. It's doing node modules. It's also ignoring a bunch of other stuff that we don't know about. We don't really necessarily need to know about it. We've got this node modules folder. That looks familiar. We've got our public folder. Let's take a look at what's in there. So our public folder holds our index.html. And you can see that there's really not a lot in there. It's just one div, essentially, that says root. This is like the standard. And I think this is what we did when we made it from scratch. These have to do with logos and what you see in the corner of your screens. We've also got the source file. And our source file's got a few things also that are interesting. We've got our index.js. Computer's like so slow now. Okay, and we can see we've got importing React or React DOM. This is like what we did before. Instead of passing in just our root here, we're actually grabbing our, we're using a component that we're passing in, and we are using our root element that we're going to throw our React app in. And we can also take a look at app, see what's going on in there. App, they give us all this code. It's got a logo, it's got some class names, it's got learn React. So let's see exactly what this actually looks like. So let's go ahead and run our script. So we're going to run npm start. And this is going to start up our app. If you're coming in late, you have to write npx space create React app, words separated by hyphens, and then the name of your app. npx. All right, so this should be built. So I'm going to open up a tab there with my localhost 3000. And we see this is our React app. You got an error?
I got an arrow too.
What's everybody's error say?
Like this. I'm in the wrong folder.
Okay. Did you guys CD into your project?
No, I gotta do that now.
Wait, are we going to the new file?
Yeah, we gotta create that.
Okay, so this is,
Create.
Are we feeding into my?
you said create React app and you made a folder. You're seeding into that folder.
No tabs.
Yeah.
I'm there.
Brandon?
NPM VS Code. Did you run NPM start?
Oh, it's a
Create.
notice with that project?
It says can we create a project name?
I saw the kid in this account.
We do that. Oh, then go back.
Just right now.
If I actually open the second, tab three.
Just what we got.
Run that command again. All right, was everybody able to get that running? All right, so we don't really need all this other crap because it's got nothing to do with our project. So let's go ahead and just delete all of that. And instead I'll start with my hello world. And let's go see how that looks. Great. So I just deleted everything, and that way I can start from scratch. So what do we notice? What do we notice about this that's different than like when we were dealing with our Webpack? Henry?
You don't have to like refresh the page, it just automatically does it.
Okay. Well, I think when we were doing it, it also was automatically doing it for us. Brutus?
Sorry, but I didn't miss how you did this, but it's in the middle.
I just
right?
deleted
The
it.
page.
Everything. Yeah, so Brutus says, hey, this is in, our text is in the middle. Right? So that seems like a little odd. Why do we think it's in the middle?
CSS?
Yeah, exactly. Conch says CSS, right? So that page we saw when it first came was already styled in a way for the React app. So let's go ahead and remove some of that styling because we don't want any of that junk. And so the way that we import CSS pages in React is just by writing import and then the name of the file, of the CSS file that you're trying to import. So I could comment that out and it would go away, or I can go ahead in my app.css file there, and I don't really want any of this CSS that's been given to me. So I'm going to delete that. I think it's the text align center that's giving us that outcome. And we'll see that now it looks like our regular web page, right? Now you might also notice that we have an index.css as well. And this is also doing some styling for us. So I'm going to remove this for now because I really don't want anyone styling anything that's not me. But this would be a great place for a CSS reset, right? Because the index, everything is going through the index. Great place. Okay, CSS reset. Okay, that's just in there for you to remember. So the way these apps work, let me just draw. Is there an eraser or something? Oh yeah, no. Nice, clutch. Thank you. Did you bring that from home, or is that just what's already there? Nice. Really? Oh. All right. No worries messing with me. I love it. If anybody needs an eraser, Nova told me he has a lot more. Okay. Right, so the way our React apps work is we have components within components. Okay, this is like the key idea to think about. So we have this index page, and from this index page, we're passing in our app component. App is generally the main app. That's like standard naming to call that app for the whole app. But app is coming through index.js, right? So this is like, if you were looking at the file structure, right? You would have to travel through index before getting to app. Does that make sense?
Not really.
Well, app is declared somewhere else. And app is being visualized through index.js. If we look here, our index.js just grabs this root element and app. That's all it does. But the whole rest of the application is going to go through app. So that means if you're using a CSS reset, it should go in your index, in your styling for index.css, because everything will be going through there on the most base level. All right, so app can have other components, right? So maybe we have a people component, and people has a person component. Right, so there's these ideas of children components. So if a component is inside of another component, the inside component is a child. Okay, so we can say like grandparent, parent, child. Right? Does that make sense? It's kind of like a family tree. Same as when we were dealing with HTML DOM things. Just like if an LI is inside of a UL, the parent of the LI is the UL. Same type of thing. If people is an app, the parent of people is app. Yep.
So then the parents, when you build those, do you build them inside of app.js, or do you make another, like a people app.js?
Great question. So Rafid's question is about how we're gonna like configure our app and architect it. So yeah, every component will have its own file. So we'll just be importing and exporting things. All right. So let's do an example from the exact same example that we did on Monday. Let's go ahead and make a person component. So in my source here, I'm just going to start to get organized, and I'm going to create a folder called components. Okay, and inside of there, I'm going to go ahead and make a person.js. And then let's go ahead and make our person, right? Yep, Kevin. Yeah, I can make it bigger. All right, so what was the first thing we need to do when we're writing a React component? Do we remember? What's the very first thing?
Import React.
Yeah, we got to import React. Import React from React. So for now, we're just going to write a functional component. So what makes a component functional? Anyone remember? All right. A functional component is written in as a function, like a ES6 kind of function, or ES5, and traditionally had no state. See, a class component is written like this, where you write class. Well, I'll just do the whole thing in one go, but like class person. This is a class component. We'll maybe learn about that later. But if we're doing a functional component, it's const person. Remember proud camel case. This can take in some sort of props. And then we can return JSX. So return, and we'll say, I don't know, div. And we'll say we'll have our name property. And for now, we'll just write Corey. But you can write something else. You don't have to write my name. All right, so a lot of this will be reviewed today. All right, and so then inside of person, what else should we be doing? What else are we going to want to do? Export? Yeah, exactly, Kelvin. Let's go ahead and export. So we'll say export default person. All right, it's the same kind of pattern over and over again. So, Yep.
Do you have to like in the other when we formalize also? Do we also have to import React DOM?
No, good question. So the question is, do we have to import React DOM? So React DOM was already imported for us in our index.js right here. And we did React DOM render app and then the DOM element that we want to render our React apps through.
Oh, and since that's the grandparent, affects the app automatically. So
Yeah, so we're only going to have React DOM one time, and then our whole app is going to go through it. The entire app will be built inside of this one element that we pass. Yeah.
So, like, how would it, I don't know, async work, or if you need a, I don't know.
How will async work?
Yeah, if
In what context?
like, all right, so when something, maybe you might not, I don't know how the DOM is manipulated. I don't know, I'm just, if everything is just opened up, like, automatically, like, I don't know how, I might just that.
Okay. Yeah, I think you're getting a little ahead of us. We will be able to use async await and asynchronous functions for sure. That's going to be just fine. But we don't really have a good way of working with them yet. Okay, so let's go ahead and import that inside of our app.js. So I don't need this label because I'm not interested in that. And we'll just import person from /components/person. Okay, now this is all case sensitive, so do be aware, try to be consistent. There's not a rule for which casing you have to make your files and things like that, but you should be consistent or you'll run into trouble eventually. All right, and let's go ahead and instead of render hello world, let's go ahead and render one of our persons. So we'll say person, and we'll do slash, it's a self-closing component. And if we check out our app, it says name Corey. Questions on this? Do we remember a lot of this from Monday?
can you just go back? Yeah.
So would we be able to do that, this function app in ES6? Cons.
Yeah, sure. The question is, can we do our app in ES6 instead of ES5? Absolutely. Nothing changes.
Show the person in JS.
Yeah. It's just a function that returns a div that says name Corey. Not too bad. All right, so let's make these a little bit more dynamic instead of hard coding all of them to be Corey. All right, let's pass in props. So a reminder, props is an object with keys inside of it. And the way those keys are passed in, here, I'll put a debugger in here so we can see it. Now it won't break. And the way this works is where we are creating our person component that we want to pass props to, we pass them in the same way we would make attributes on an HTML tag. So I can go ahead and say name, and we do JSX, curly braces. And so I'll just say Corey in here, where I could pass in lots of properties, no comma, my mistake. We could do age, 100. Right, make sure you close your curly braces. Right, this is how I would pass in multiple things. Each one of these is a prop. They make up props. Okay. So we can save that. We can go here, we hit our debugger. I think this is from earlier. Am I in the debugger? No. Oh, is it gonna break again? That's so funny. Like this happened the other day on my is it like my computer?
Acting weird again?
Yes, that's so funny.
Well, it's not hitting the debugger now.
Well, it's not showing anything to the screen. That's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do it.
Nobody's hitting it.
It hit and then when I refresh it, it hit and then when I refresh it.
All right. Well, I'll just remove it for a second. Let's see what happens.
Mine just says failed to
I do not. This like 100% should work, but it keeps not working. It's really funny. Does anybody? Does it work for anybody?
Yeah, it's working.
It works for you. It should work. That is so bizarre. I'll just kill it and run it again. I don't know why this keeps happening to me. Does it work for some of you?
Yeah, it doesn't work.
It works on mine.
And you can see props as an object with name and age. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's what it should be doing.
Over, yeah.
Now it worked for you too. Oh man, why doesn't it work for me? All right. Well, I'm just gonna use a different thing then, because for whatever reason, debugger's like acting super weird for me. So I'm just gonna console log, and I'll just console log props and not worry about the debugger. And we can see, hey now, right? We've got these props. So this is what the props object looks like. So I can key into this like any object we've ever dealt with, right? So instead of having Corey here and hard coding that, instead I'm going to say props.name. Okay, if I do that, well, it still shows Corey because that's the prop we're passing in. Any questions on that?
Can you just go back to how you did the debugger for
I didn't put it. I took it out. I'm console logging.
And so how did you key into it? And
Well, right here, props.name.
just, okay.
Any other questions on that? Okay. Remember, we can also do destructuring in the argument itself. So instead of writing the word props here, I could destructure and take the name out. So that has to be inside of an object. So now here I'll just log my name. And instead of having props.name, I will just have it say name. Oh, jeez. I'll just have it say name. Right. Oops. And now we still get it. Now we're just printing the name. But there's nothing wrong with doing props dot. Yeah, Sim.
Good question. You have a debugger. I got my debugger working, right? Once I click, I guess like continue on the debugger, I'll have to manually refresh it, my debugger to pop up again, right?
Yeah, or next time that React.
Because it doesn't refresh the debugger automatically.
No. I don't believe so. Okay, so this is the power of props. We can pass props and use components. So just to do this again, to drill this in a bit more, in our app.js, now if I could show 3 components, I could say John, I could say Jen, yeah, what one? Well, my shortcut's different. I think for you it's like Option Shift down. Was it? Okay. Right, and so now just like that I can make this list of Corey, John, and Jenny. I'm going to create a CSS folder just to keep things a little bit neater. And inside of my CSS folder, I'm going to make a file, and I'm going to call this person.css. Okay.
That's in the components.
No, it's not supposed to be. No, it's not in the
Oh, it's
components.
also.
Okay, so now I've got my person.css. I'm going to style my JS persons a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and give this an ID for now. Just say like ID is like person. Or actually, I'm going to have lots of these. So this is going to be class name. So I now have a class called persons. I know before we would just write class. With React, we write class name. Okay, it's not too big of a difference. Actually, I think this is also supposed to be JSX.
What
Like-
about for an ID? ID name?
Just ID.
Just ID.
Yeah, so it's actually like this. Sorry, so it isn't curly braces and things, so I think you'll get a complaint. Okay, so now that we've got our person div, I'm going to go ahead and style that. So I'm going to just say dot person, and let's give it a border. 1 pix, solid, red. I don't know. We'll give it a padding, 20 pix. Let's give it a margin. 20 pix. Okay, so we have like a little bit of styling. Let's make the font big. Say font size, we'll say 25 pix. Okay, so I'm just throwing on some styles so that we can see this. And so now my person, I want to import these styles so that it'll be acted on in this component. This is one of the ways to style in React. There's actually a couple of different ways. One is to create a styles object. But this is kind of nice, and we can split up our CSS styling on multiple files, right? So that's really sweet. Okay, so in here we'll just say import, and then we'll say the relative path. So I think it's /CSS/person.css. And we go back to here, and wowza, that's because I'm so zoomed in, I think.
No, you have the PX at 225.
Do I?
Yeah.
Great. Nice. Yeah, good catch. Right, so my pixels I probably don't need my font to be quite that big. But we can see like, hey, we're able to style all of these in mass pretty easily and cleanly in its own file. styling doesn't look great yet, but you know, that's okay. Let's give each one a width so it looks a little bit more normal. We'll give it a width of like 200 pixels.
Is the CSS in components?
Nope, it's in my CSS folder outside of components.
What's outside of the components, top of the
Mhm.
components.
Okay.
No, I would keep CSS outside, yeah. Yes.
It's not in source either?
No.
Oh.
Oh, it is in source. I have it in source. It doesn't have to be in source. I have mine in source right now. I'm not sure what I would usually do on a project. I'd have to go back and check. But that's kind of cool. We can style all of these things.
Can you show what the import looks like?
Yes. It's just import and then the relative path.
How do I
Yep.
go to the server and then start it?
Control C,
Okay, try that.
maybe twice. Is it working? When you're Control C or would you like to run the app on the report? Something is already running report 3000. So if you want to run it on the report, yeah. Was everyone able to successfully style their app a little bit? So what are your errors?
Say module not found.
Then your path is wrong.
But it's self-selected, like it could read that SRC from CSS.
Have you moved it since? Okay.
I'm not getting nothing on the page
Like the, how it did before.
Oh, I think that's probably yeah.
I just actually did something, I don't know if I can.
Did you already just move it after?
I just.
Nice.
I'm getting nothing.
I'm getting nothing.
No errors? Are you, where's your person?
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, Tom. It's not-
Is that the right file?
Yeah. It's in source.
Oh, save it? Did it ever work for you? When?
Person.js is what's actually.
Did you comment on that CSS much of the work?
That's what we're, that's what you want the information. No, I think it's a video.
Yeah.
So there's something else that's right on it before. So I don't know. Every time. I see it. When was the last time?
I just read that and I don't need to read it. Okay,
CSS.
Yeah, here, it was, when it was just name and, you know, I
Oh, I didn't see that.
That's very odd. I'm not sure. Still doing it? Just start. Yeah, where's your post?
First of all, when I start. It was working out.
I can't find your word. It keeps going away. Somewhere on the screen is supposed to show.
I'll prefer Sunday night, so that we can recover. Sounds right. You work on it, work. They picked the ones. They not be tested over. Now they say
They were giving me a story.
I actually, we're gonna fight.
Yeah, that's because it's not hard for us.
Not supposed to.
It's a warning. It should be.
Everybody's getting.
The work that we're doing, like we have to pay for the food that we need.
You're. I was distracted.
And make follows.
First of all,
I'm unsure.
Would you like to do everything?
oh, I think I just learned your name.
That's
I would
weird.
do everything.
Okay. Did pretty much everybody get this far here? Okay, great. So this is like one of the biggest things about React is just this idea of passing props and displaying it in reusable components. So let's do again what we did on Monday and extrapolate this a little bit further. So let's go ahead and make another component called people. And we'll say .js. What's the first thing we have to do? Import React. Yeah, Doug?
Do you nest like all the components inside each other?
Yeah. A lot of the time. This question's about nesting components. So components are always going to, you're going to keep, this is the component hierarchy. So components are going to be inside of components, which is going to be inside of components. You have to start thinking about pages as different components and how things will be. So our functional components currently are going to focus on display only. And then when we have class components, we'll be dealing with something else. A little bit. All right, so let's go ahead and make our people. So we'll say const people, and it's going to, sure, this will take in, we'll say props, sure. And for now, oh, cool, thank you. Yeah, I wish it did have that dash. So instead, and for now, we're just going to return a div, and we'll say all people, just to make sure we've got stuff working. Let's export this. And let's go ahead and import this in our app.js. So we'll go to app, and we'll import people from /component/ I did person again, people. And then at the very top of this, let's go ahead and just make people. And we'll slash it.
Inside.
Just inside of our app. Yeah. And we'll go over here. And we'll refresh, and we see it says all people in there, right? It's kind of small, but it says it. All right, so we can see right now we have one component called app. That's rendering two entirely different components, but actually it's 4 components that we have rendering, right? We have one all people and then 3 separate components, right? We can see them all in our app. Something to note, let's pretend I didn't put this div here, and I just wanted to render all of these components together. Hopefully we'll see an error. Yep. And so our error there says adjacent JSX elements must be wrapped in an enclosing tag. And then it has a great suggestion. Did you want to use a JSX fragment? So what does this error mean? Yeah, so it needs one tag. So each component should only be returning one tag, right? There can be as many tags and children inside of that. But in the end, it should only be one tag. Now, a negative with this in the past was that it kind of had some problems with accessibility, because for a long time, every component was wrapped in a div. And so everything was nested further into a div when it really didn't need to be. Does that make sense? So what happened is React came out with something called a React fragment, which means if you're trying to return multiple children, but you don't want an actual div to be rendered there on the screen, instead we can go like this, where we say React.fragment, and we can wrap everything in a React fragment. So a React fragment means we can have, like, it's fragmented, right? Like all of these children can show up. So now our app works fine, and if we look and we inspect this in our elements, we can see we'll have our root div, which is expected because the whole app is coming through the root div. But then we have our separate divs from each of these components, and these aren't all wrapped in another div, right? We would have had one extra div before. I can show that again. So if I get rid of React fragment here, so pay attention, count the divs, right? We've got our root ID, and then we have 4 separate divs, right? Inside of the root. But the whole project's going to be through root regardless. Okay, now if we go back and I select my React fragment, and I write div, and I save it. Let's go through it. Now we have our root, and our root returns one div, and then in that div, we have our 4 more divs. So we have this extra div in the middle. So it's better to have React fragment in that sense. Now, if you don't like writing all of that, React fragment, because neither do I, you can just write it like this.
It said it right there when you.
Yeah, it says it in the error. These errors are beautiful in React for the most part. So now it will still work the same, but we don't have that extra div of everything again. Right, React fragment is pretty normal, but you might see it in React.fragment. If you want to add properties to it, like styling things and stuff, then you have to write React.fragment. But if you're just using it to hold things, you can write it like this. And it's less writing, so I always write it like this. Make sense? All right, so let's have our people actually do a little bit more. So we know that people can take props, right? Because we're in control of everything, and we can make it take props if we want it to. So I'm going to make an array. I'm going to call this a people array. And I have to do my JSX, what I want in there. This is my key value, right? And I'm just going to have this be an array. Like I'll say Corey. Well, let's do it as objects. So I'll say name pointing to Corey. And I'll have another object that's name pointing to John, and a final object with name pointing to Jenya. Right, this is a little hard to read, so I'm just going to split this up a little bit to make it easier. Right, this is the equivalent of one line. It's just split up to be easier to read.
You know, option D, correct? Option D, if you had the one liner.
Really?
Press option D, press it for you.
All right, let's see. Oh, well, I got rid of. Okay, name. Yeah, option Z. No, not for me.
No, okay, now press it. Yeah,
Oh.
press it before and press it for you.
It's not as clean as I like it. Oh well, okay. That's a cool trick. I didn't know that. Thank you, Jenny. Okay, so now we have a component called people that has a prop called people as well, and that prop points to an array of objects. So now inside of our people, let's go over to people. Beautiful people. Ed Sheeran, new song, right? We'll say log. Sorry? What change?
People equals object.
When did I do that?
Yeah, no, where?
Inside of the app.js there. I just wrote it in as passing it in as a prop. Ed Sheeran is fire. We all know that. He's a hype beast, lit, all the words. Making that bread and chicken. All right, I'm hip. I move with the flow. Okay, so we've got people here, right? People takes in. These are our props. So let's go ahead and actually print down our props here. So we'll go to our console, and we see we have our props. Our props look like an object. Props are always one object. And we've got our key value, right? Our key being what looked like those attributes we put in while we were declaring that component. So we've got people pointing to an array of 3 elements, each of those elements being an object with the key value, name, and the name. Questions on that? Yeah, Marvin. Okay, what's it say? Do you have props in your people? All right, let's take a look at it. What is there? You're not in the debugger.
I'm getting a line that says person
Yeah. So Henry says he's getting a warning that says person is defined but never used. And I know some of you are also getting that. That is because we have person in our app.js, but we are not using it. Right? So I don't really need that. That was old news. So I can delete that. I'm commenting out for you. You guys can just delete it though. So because instead we're using people. Using people.
Can you show me?
Yeah. So our people, we've got our props. So what might I want to do with those props? I'm going to want to use them. So I could write props.people to get the array, or I could destructure this and write people, because that way I don't have to keep writing props.this, props.that over and over again. Right, and so this is a function, so we can make variables in this function. We can do pretty much anything we want, right? And that includes return arrays of JSX. So let's go ahead and do that. Because this is like one of the biggest concepts of React. If you get this, you'll get like so many displaying things. Because it's all about grabbing a lot of data, and printing all of it in a screen in a replicable manner. Right? Okay, so let's go ahead and also import our person class. So we'll say import person from /person. And so we've got our people. Our people is an array of people, right? And so I'm going to reassign that. People equals people.map. I'm going to map through these people. And for each person, which is an element in my array, so I'll say person. I can do something for this person, but we have a way of displaying an individual person already, yes? We've done that. We already did that back before, right? It looks like this one, right? It takes in the name and just prints the name. It doesn't do much.
So you return that.
So that's what we're going to return in our map. So we're going to return people, or person, my mistake. And then we have to pass person its props. So the prop it's expecting is name. So I'll say name. And our person here, the element in the array, is an object with the name pointing to the name. So inside of here, I'll do my JSX, and I'll just do person.name. Oops. And so then let's return something different. We don't need to return a div with all the people. Instead, let's return a UL. And inside of the UL, we'll say we want our JSX to evaluate people. So if we do that, it should look the way it originally looked.
I literally just kept killing the server and restarting.
It works now?
Yeah.
Huh. This is so bizarre. I'm glad it works now. What's your error set?
Functions are not valid as React child.
Are you invoking something? Are you?
Should that be a space?
Is this, what's this? It's a capital A.
Oh,
This is your keyboard.
well,
We're doing.
Wait.
We're trying to return this.
all that. On swing people. Now it works.
Oh, so you probably got a warning. I don't know why I'm not getting it, but it probably says that you should have unique keys for every child in an iterator. So let's go ahead and take care of that warning. So the keys there, by default, will become the indices. You don't really want to use the indices unless you have to. Because indices can, if your list could be changing size and whatnot, React uses those keys to keep track of things that it might need to delete, add, or update. So it uses that to be more efficient and keep track of things. So in this case scenario, all of our persons have unique names. So I'm going to add my key inside of here. This does not get passed down as part of the props. And I'll say person.name. And that should take care of your error. Usually you would do the ID of the thing, but our objects don't have IDs because we just kind of wrote them real quick and dirty. Does it take care of that error?
Yeah, yes it does.
Great.
So what's the key for again?
The key is for React, so it can know what to update, delete, change. It keeps track of all your elements.
So it's keeping track by the name.
Just keeping track of person not name.
It's thinking of it as an ID. You typically want it to be an ID. It has to be a unique thing. We're using names because our names are all unique right now.
Oh.
Also, in the person.
In a real world, I would use an ID because we would all have unique IDs. Yep.
But you wouldn't have to pass the key again in the people.
So each person could.
No, so this is all. So the key is only for iterating, like when you're mapping through things. Yeah, just when you're mapping through, and it has to be on the thing that's coming out of that iteration. So we wouldn't put the key on the inside of the person. We would just put the key on this component here. This is super pattern, super duper common pattern in React.
So
You will write the equivalent of this probably 1,000 times in your life. Yep.
So the key technically creates the ID with each of them.
The key doesn't create the ID. The key is only for React for its performance purposes.
Okay.
You should use the ID to be the key usually.
So you use the ID.
Yeah, as the key. You should use some unique property. And key IDs are always unique. Any other questions on this? Okay, so then I'm going to lightly introduce the idea of state, right? So far, all we've been doing are things that are visual. It's just being display. All we are is displaying information. And that is a huge part of React, but the other small part, big part, is keeping track of something called state or local state. So the state for that component. And this is where users tend to interact with the page. Okay? So let's go ahead and do that. So inside of component, I'm going to create a new component. I'm going to call this clicker.js. Okay. So let's import React from React. Yeah. Let me see. And then we're going to make a class. So we can say class, the name of our class. So for now, let's call it Clicker. And we want to use some inheritance that React's components give us. So we'll say extends React.component. And we'll also export default of our Clicker.
So React.component is what?
So React is this list of library, and this allows us. It has a component class, and we are inheriting from that. So we get everything that comes with a React component. So there's a few special things that come with the component, which we haven't learned yet.
So it's something that's already there.
Yes, React is going to do a lot. Okay, so there's only one one really big requirement that's different from our functional components, which is instead of just having a return, you have to have a render. Every class component needs to have a render, and then that render can return something. So let's just return. Let's throw a div in there and say Clicker. So it's just a little bit different syntax, but it's the class syntax. So it should look somewhat familiar. Well, we actually will have a constructor here too. That's coming up. Although then we'll later on learn that we can remove it. So you guys should know React has changed pretty rapidly. So the way I wrote React when I first learned it is like pretty different to the way it's being written now. So you'll have to learn all of it. You should definitely be aware of the way I learned it when I learned it, because a lot of code is written like that, like a lot. Where you get hired, it's going to be like that, But you might be adding onto it and writing it in the more new way with hooks and things. Okay, so let's say we have our class there. Let's go ahead and import that in our app. So we'll go app, and we will import Clicker from /component/Clicker. And let's go ahead and just do it underneath all this stuff. So we'll say Clicker and now we have Clicker, right?
Where do you put the clicker?
I just put it inside of app. I have it not doing anything special at all right now. So just like our functional components and all that, our class components can also take in props. Okay, they don't have to, but they can. If they were to take in props, we would do something that we're learning for now, where we would write constructor, and we would say props, and super, and our super would take in our props. Does that look familiar? Okay. So just so you know, we will eventually be able to not use this anymore. So I spoke a little bit about having a local state. So the state for our clicker. We're building a little clicker app. So you click and it will keep track of how many times we've clicked. Okay? So inside of our constructor, let's set up our state. So we're going to say this dot state. State here is referring to this instance of clicker. And this will be an object. And maybe we want to keep track of the count, right? So we'll say count. And what's a good initial value for the count? 0, okay. That sounds like that makes sense. Okay. So this is just like the constructors we've dealt with, where we have state pointing to this state. So let's actually render the clicks here. So clicker, and I'll say you've clicked. Whoops. I don't know how to spell anything. Nope. You've clicked, and then let's do our JSX. And I'll say this dot state dot count times. So, right, this refers to this as in this instance of the clicker, dot our state, which is what we've created there in our constructor, dot count, which is the key in our state object, and it should give us back our value. So when we look at the page, it should say, clicker, you've clicked 0 times. Okay. Nothing too crazy yet, right? Hopefully not too bad. Okay. So we should probably add a button in here to let people click. So let's go ahead and make a button. And I'll say, click me. I'm going to remove this clicker part because it seems redundant at this point. Okay, so now we've got a button that says click me. Let's go check to make sure everything's working. Okay, it says you click 0 times, click me, and nothing happens. Why is nothing happening? Because we don't have an event listener, right? So the way we can make event listeners is kind of nice. I'm going to show you the older way first and then the new way. So the first way, we would like to create something to handle click. Yes? So I'm going to add that as a method in our class. So I'm going to say handle click. This is going to, I guess it will take in an event. It doesn't really need to for this one, but for habit, I'm just going to use event. And I'm going to do something that's special for React here, which is we can set the state. Okay, so a lot of you might be tempted to go this.state.count plus equals 1, right? This is something we would have done up to this point in our programming life, yes? Okay. In React, this is unacceptable. Never, ever do this. This is mutating state directly. In React, we never mutate state because everything, I erased it, has to be pure functions. So we can create a new state instead to cause a new render. So we don't say this.count plus equals 1. Instead, we can say this dot set state. This is given to us. We can pass in an object. It's a couple of things to do. I'm going to keep it like more simple for now. this.setState it can take a function, or it can take in an object. And that object, we say what key we want to update in our state. So we want to update which key? Count. And then what do we want our new count to be?
Plus one.
Yeah, so we'll say this.state dot count plus 1. That's okay. We're not mutating anything. Okay, so this is our new event that we've created. Now, in order to put this event listener on the button, it's kind of nice. What's the event we want to listen for? Click. So we'll say on click equals our JSX. And now we're going to say what event we want to, what do we want to fire? So we're going to say this dot handle click. Option Z apparently. I hate how that's formatting things. Absolutely despise that, Virginia. It's not. Okay, I just close that. Okay, so I think we're gonna still hit an error, but let's just wait and see. Okay, so here we refresh and we click it. Oh, cannot read set state of undefined. Damn it! I thought we had it. Although I did announce we were gonna hit an error. How are callback functions? What is the this when a callback function is fired? Oh, I wish. Right? Callback functions happen later because they're waiting for this event and then this thing fires. So it ends up getting called on the window. So it's undefined. It loses its correct this. So the way it used to be solved, and the way you'll still see it in a lot of documents, is you go up inside of your constructor and you say this dot, and you say the name of the method you want to, and you say that you assign this to this dot handle click, but then you use something called binding to bind the current this, and you say bind, and you pass in this. A little bit funny looking, but this is the way you'll see it in a lot of documentation. This is the way I learned to write it.
Is the older way.
This is a slightly older way. So, well, it's kind of, I really like it, but it's okay.
This dot handle click equals this dot handle click.
It's repetitive, right?
Yeah, it's a little repetitive, but now it works. So now we have this. Now we have this component of keeping track of state, right? Us as a user can interact with something we're building. Okay, so this is the way we're learning it. What's going on? You got a bug? Oh.
They're excited.
Okay. Cool. You're gonna miss the next piece. So one of the advantages with fat arrow functions is that they bind this to where they were declared. Right? So this comes out of the box for us in Create React App. If you use the Webpack that we built together from scratch, you'll have to configure it differently for this to work. But for Create React App, this will work instead. So this is the way you'll have to do it if you do it in our first project we built together. However, since we're using Create React App, we can just go ahead and make this a fat arrow function. What? So if it's a fat arrow function, it will also now work. Okay, so this is out of the box on Create React App. This will not work necessarily in every app you meet.
Wait. You said it will not work?
Not in the way like the Webpack we built on Monday night. This will not work like that.
So we would have to.
You have to configure it differently.
Equals
You would have to do it the first way, or you could throw a. You can also do a dot bind here.
Oh,
Dot bind this. You could also do that.
okay. I like that.
But it's nicer at the top because then you could actually see every function that's going to be needed at the top of a file.
So we're reassigning this dot handle click to this dot handle click dot bind just.
In here, yes. You're just binding, but the way bind works is it keeps a context of things. Okay, so this is one way to write this. So something you should know about set state is asynchronous. Okay? It doesn't return a promise though, like you would want it to. Instead, it just is going to happen at some point. Usually very fast. But if you call multiple set states right after one another, you're not guaranteed that they will fall in the correct order. Does that make sense? So just because one got called before the other one, if they're stacked up, doesn't mean that this will resolve first. So if you ever need something to depend on what state currently is, you should pass in a function in your set state, which is something I don't have to do very often, but trying to find a good example of it. So instead of set state here, I will have a function that says previous state, and I think it can also take props. And I will return my new count to previous state dot count. Let me make sure that just works before we all write it. Nope. Oh, okay, that's the syntax. Hang on, something's broken.
Yeah, the column, what's the project, one more project.
Right here, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, let's see if this is gonna work for us.
No, you're missing,
Parentheses.
right there, front.
Oh, thank you. Right. So nice debugging with a class. Okay, so there's two ways to do set state. This is the little bit more complicated one, but it's technically deemed safer. Okay, I encourage you to experiment with both. So the first way was we just passed a straight up object into our set state with the key and then the new value. In this one, we are passing in a function that automatically will take the previous state, so that way you don't have to worry about the asynchronicity. Takes a previous state and props, and then you return the new object just like before. The same thing we passed in before, except for this time it's count and previous state dot count plus one. This is the safer way to do it. We will go over all of this again. This is still like the React preview. Although we've really learned a lot of React now.
Why you said this was a safe way?
This is safe because set states, when you call multiple ones at the same time, they actually all get merged into one set state under the hood. And so there's not a guaranteed order of how things are going to evaluate because they are asynchronous. And so this way allows us to get the previous state only instead of what it could end up being later. I know that's a little bit of a complicated thing, but this is the better way to write it. I bet you the other classes aren't writing it like this. So this could be your edge. I'd bet almost anything. It doesn't usually, there's not usually a problem. There can be. So this is a good way around that. Other small preview, last small preview of the day. You no longer need constructor and props. Those come in anyway. So you can clean up your functions like that. And if you do that, you don't use this dot state because you just create a variable there called state, and everything will still work the same. It's just a little bit less writing. Very, very slick way of writing it now.
That's it?
Also,
Bro.
you have to take out the
I'm fine.
You can remove constructor and super. Prompts will still be passed in automatically.
Do it, what did you just do?
I removed the constructor and props. I'll show you if I console.log this in our cookie clicker here. You see we still get our props, but we're not currently passing it any props, so it's empty object. We get our context, our refs. These all refer to things we have in our React. We have our state, count 0, our handle click. Should look familiar to what we wrote. And that's our app, yep. I expect you to know both of these types of ways. Not like right now, because we just talked about it once. But by the end of today, but by the end of the unit, I expect you to know all of these ways. Also, we're going to learn how to do it with a functional component next. Not today. Yeah, Shia.
If your app is not saving what you've entered, but it's not throwing the errors, what does that necessarily mean?
Means there's an error, probably. Well, I'll look at that with you in a minute. Any other questions on this? Anything at all? Anything you want to know about React? All right, cool. I'm so excited for the rest of this unit. There's like a lot of stuff that I'm like dying to show you guys. But we'll have to wait, I think, a little bit more. Like this weekend, we can go nuts. I think we'll go through it faster. But that way we'll have more time to like go over. Okay? All right, thank you. Do whatever you